Good morning. Call to order. We'll establish a quorum. Ricardo, do you want to start us out?
Yeah, Ricardo Sanchez, public member.
Debbie Veal, professional member.
Stan Weiser, professional member.
Victor Law, licensee member.
Amy Gutierrez, licensee member.
Greg Lippy, public member.
Lavanza Butler, professional member.
Valerie Munoz, public member.
Alan Chad, licensee member.
Albert Wong, professional member.
And licensee and professional member are the same thing, for those of you wondering in the audience.
I must have missed a CE program where they determined that.
We kind of had a discussion about it. We thought even though public members are not licensees, they're still professional. So we thought if we called ourselves licensee members,
Okay.
it distinguishes a little different.
Yeah, it's one of those PC things.
From the public member.
Okay, I'm just hearing that.
All right, public comments for items not on the agenda or agenda items for future meetings. Are there any? If you want to, you can please come up to the microphone. All right, if not, we'll move on to item 3, approval of the February 6 to 7, 2017 board meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any board discussion? Public comments? All in favor? Raise your hand. Did you get everyone?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, approval of the March 27th, 2017 board meeting minutes.
So moved.
Any board member comments? Okay. Public comments? Okay, all in favor? Do we have any,
And I am also,
I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Yeah, we got her. Right, we got her. There were some other abstentions to the right. Yeah. You got them all? Yes. Okay, or do we have any 50-year pharmacists that have signed up? No one has signed. Anyone here? Is anyone here for recognition and celebration of 50 years license? No? Okay, if not, we'll move on to item 6. And before we get to that, I want to recognize we have 3 former board presidents in the room to acknowledge them. Ken Shell. Rafi Simonian. And Darlene Fujimoto. I guess that's where former board presidents live, all right? Come to San Diego. It's all the sunshine. So I'll be joining your ranks very soon. So we're going to start off with the board officer elections. And before we start, I just want to thank the board for the amazing 3 years as board president. We've done a lot of great things during these last 3 years, including licensing our first APP pharmacist, getting our sterile compounding regulations revised, looking at our inventory reconciliation regs, some of the outsourcing work, and it's been a great 3 years, and I want to thank all of the board members for the support as I end my presidential reign. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Let me interject. I'd like to congratulate our president on the great work that she's done for 3 years. Let's give her a hand.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Greg. So we're going to open this up for board officer election. So we'll start out with president. Is there any nominations for president of the board?
I'd like to make a motion for nomination for Victor Law for president.
Second.
I'll second that also.
A third. Are there any other nominations for president? Okay.
Motion to close nominations.
Motion to close nominations. Okay, all in favor of Victor Law for president, raise your hand, please. Victor voted for himself. That's good. It's a good move. It's a good move, yes. All right, I'll open up the floor for nominations for vice president of the board.
I'd like to nominate Greg Lippe for vice president.
Second.
Second, Stan.
You bet.
Okay, motion. Is there any other nominations for vice president? Is there a motion to close nominations?
Motion to close.
Okay. All in favor of Greg Lippe for vice president, raise your hand. Got it? No, raise your hand. Come on. All right, unanimous? You want to have unanimous.
That's true.
All right, open up the floor for nominations for treasurer.
I'd like to nominate Alan Shad.
Nomination for
Second.
Alan.
Second.
Second?
I second.
There's a third and a second.
Yeah,
Okay.
second, third.
Motion to close.
I think we should always have 2 seconds because it's second.
Second.
Yeah. Motion to close? Yes. Second? All right. All in favor of Alan Shad for treasurer, raise your hand. Got it? Unanimous? All right. Okay, moving on to item number 7, update from the Department of Consumer Affairs. And I think I saw Chris here. Yes, he's here. So we'd ask Chris for an update on the salary category level increase for the position of the executive officer and other items. And as you may recall, the board actually voted for an increase for Ms. Harold in our meeting last year, and we just wanted to hear an update on where we are with that particular request to increase her salary.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Chris Castrillo with the Department of Consumer Affairs, Deputy Director for Board and Bureau Services. Appreciate the opportunity to be down here today. Before I get into my formal update for the board, just with respect to the board president's question, the exempt position request that was last submitted came back from agency, which was denied in February, which was communicated to board leadership back then. The board always has the opportunity to resubmit these exempt position requests, and my office, in conjunction with the Office of Human Resources, is more than happy to work with your board leadership and incoming board leadership on any kind of resubmittal that you would like to make.
Okay, so and I understand that there's a study that's going to be incurred or going to be ongoing.
Absolutely. So as part of the department's strategic plan, one of the strategic plan items that we are undergoing in 2018 is an EO salary study. The department did a salary study back in 2011. We think it's kind of due time to take a look now that it's been 7 years past since that study has came out. And we want to take a look at a number of things. We've had a number of discussions with board leadership, our executive officers, on the issue of executive officer increases and level increases. That's where our program might change a salary band. And we've been soliciting feedback on what we want that scope of work to look like. We want to examine how the board exempt position request process goes. What are kind of the key metrics that we're looking for? Have those a little bit more robustly defined, a little bit more clear for our boards and our executive officers to have that more defined. In addition to taking a look at comparable positions across other states, which was something that was a part of the 2011 study. We've been soliciting feedback from our executive officers. We recently discussed this at our Directors Quarterly this past Monday. We hope to have this RFQ finalized and out for bid in the next couple of weeks, and would like to have that turned around, finalized in about a 6-month timeline, hopefully having the contract awarded by July, and ideally having the results of this study, which I think could inform some changes for how this process goes to the department by January 1, 2019.
Amy, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Was it denied because you're anticipating doing this study?
So to be clear, the exempt position requests go through a variety of different levels of approval. So they come up through board leadership. The department takes a look at it. My office takes a look at it. We sign off on it. Our director, Mr. Graffilo, signs off on it. That then goes up to agency. There's also CalHR approval, and there's governor's office approval. I don't know, and this is something that I understand can be frustrating for boards, not just for Board of Pharmacy, but any board that runs into the situations. We don't necessarily know where at what level that denial comes back from. We get that the request was denied, and then we communicate that to board leadership.
So it made it out of DCA. It was somewhere between DCA and the governor.
That's correct.
I have a question. Regarding your study, and I think it's a great idea, what was the criteria for going outside for a study and not just using, developing the study from inside the DCA, given the fact that you're so familiar with all the different agencies and the executive officers in particular?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. So as I referenced, we had a study in 2011, obviously predates my time with the department. I'm about 7 months in here. We, in that process of soliciting feedback from our executive officers, I think that study was received lukewarmly from some of our folks, and that we wanted to make sure that we're going to put together a study that our executive officers and frankly our boards have confidence in, that's going to return some really quality results. So we didn't want to just go back to the same vendor. We didn't necessarily want to just go and try to do this in-house, but we want to take a look at a third party who also has the benefit of not being within the department and kind of having that critical eye of what does the process look like, how does this all work, hopefully with vendors who have experience in this type of study to provide us what we feel like would be some quality evidence to potentially make some changes for how this process works in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chris, can you also outline how this impacts? Because I know one of the issues we've had was this impaction with the assistant executive officer. What are the board's options with that?
Yeah, compaction is an issue where we have run into with the fact that our executive officers are exempt appointees and the individuals that they manage beneath them are civil service, and that can create scenarios in which if an exempt position request is not being approved, then it can kind of executive officer staying here and civil service can start to creep up. I think the board might have some options with respect to that, and I think we would be open to discussing that with our Office of Human Resources. Of course, you, Amy, your incoming board leadership, executive officer, more than happy to discuss what options might be available too.
Victor, can you take that on and do a review? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Chris? Yeah, as I talked to you before and
Yeah.
your director, whatever you guys come up, I would like to see that at least the deputy and the executive director to be a correct level. I just cannot see how can your salary could be higher than your director salary. So it doesn't make sense. I mean, like I say, if there's position, a director available, you wouldn't want to move up because you make more than he does. Why would you want to move up? So, I want to make sure you emphasize that when you guys, whatever you guys settle on that.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think the compaction issue is a very compelling one to take a look at, and that's an element of the salary study that we want to have included as well across all of our programs.
So as we go forward and continue to pursue our request of some time ago now, time frame and process. What's a good time frame for us to contact the DCA and renew our effort? Who would be the contact person? What's going to be the best way for us to go forward?
Yeah, so I'm always happy to be the contact. The Office of Board and Bureau Services has sort of taken over this role of kind of overseeing the exempt position request process. Generally speaking, these go hand in hand with the executive officer evaluations. And so I'd recommend continuing on with that schedule, if you will. That being said, if the board would like to submit a request, sometime before that, my office is more than happy to facilitate that. We just want to have a conversation with board leadership about how that would work.
But you said
Yeah.
you said the study won't be done until January 19.
Yeah, all of our timelines are estimated at the moment. My goal is to have that implemented, have the study completed by January 1, 2019.
All right. So
Yeah.
if we were to pursue something before that, it wouldn't be effective. I mean, nothing would happen.
I don't want to say that unilaterally the study going on doesn't necessarily mean that there's a pause, if you will. Certainly we want that study to inform how we can do this a little bit better. You're more than welcome to submit requests while that's going on. The study is not like I said, it's not a pause on the ability to submit those requests and have them looked at.
Thank you.
So
Excuse-
I just would like to make one other comment, if I could, Amy.
Yeah, go ahead.
I hope you understand our drive here, because our board has grown exponentially. The responsibilities, the activities, the number of employees over the past, I don't know, 10 years. And we think our executive officer and also our, what do we call you? Assistant executive officer?
Now, staff.
Her, Anne. You know, we just think very highly of them, and we want them to be compensated appropriately. We also don't want to lose them. So we want them to stay here with us with their steady hand, continuing to guide us as long as we possibly can. So this is super important to us.
And I want to agree with what Debbie just said, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping that there's retro involved with that.
So I couldn't agree with you more. I think the executive officers are the our executive officers are our executive officers are the backbone of what we do at DCA. You have a fantastic executive officer. You know, Ginny's been around for quite a while. I've leaned on her as I've come into my position on sort of how things work around the department. And as well, it's not lost on us that we have really, really good staff across all of our boards who run the day-to-day, who have a lot of varied tasks that go beyond just putting on the board meeting, interacting with media, setting policy, managing staff. It's certainly a priority for this department to recruit, retain, and attract talent, particularly for our positions of executive officers, which are frankly very, very difficult positions. So we share that belief, and as part of doing this salary study with me trying to take this issue kind of head on and making it work better for all of our parties, something I'm very, very interested in. It's why it's part of our strategic plan in 2018 and why we're trying to go full speed ahead with it.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
I have a
Oh, any
I was
any
going to
more
say,
questions?
I
I'm
have a
sorry.
couple other things you might be interested in as well as part of my update, but I don't want to jump ahead if there's any other questions on salary. Okay, very cool. So we have a new deputy director of legislation. We've had a few new faces over in our executive offices, myself included. We're very pleased to welcome Dennis Cuevas Romero. He was most recently the government relations director at the American Heart Association, American Stroke Association in Sacramento 2016. He started with us about a month and a half ago. I know he's looking forward to getting around to each of our boards and making the opportunity to say hello and get to know you all. So I know he looks forward for the opportunity to do that. I already mentioned that we had our directors quarterly meeting this past Monday, spoke a lot about a number of key issues, executive officer salary study being one of them, pro rata, the implementation of a technology governance group, so on and so forth. Ginny, appreciate your attendance in that meeting, and we look forward to having another one in about 3 months here. We've also kicked off a couple of other meetings that we feel like are very, very important. The first one being the licensing and enforcement work groups. Talked a little bit of about the department's strategic plan for 2018. As part of that strategic plan, we have the launching of licensing and enforcement work groups across all of our boards. The thought here is to get subject matter experts from our boards on licensing, subject matter experts from our boards on enforcement, getting them together in a room and talking about best practices. We have boards that do certain things really, really well. We have boards that might need some help in certain areas. Getting everybody together to share what those practices are on both the licensing and enforcement side, we feel like can help really, really improve sort of the blocking and tackling of what our boards do, the licensing and enforcement side. So we're very, very happy to have those launch, and we appreciate the involvement of the Board of Pharmacy in that. Additionally, we have a legislative mandate from SB 796 of last year to reconvene the Substance Abuse Coordination Committee to take a look at Uniform Standard Number 4. Again, appreciate Ms. Harold's participation in that committee. This convenes all of the executive officers from our Healing Arts boards to take a look at the Uniform Standard, particularly Uniform Standard Number 4, which deals with drug testing frequency for probationers within the program. That was our first meeting this month, in April. We're now in May, and we will be reconvening that. Be reconvening that group at least one more time, potentially two. And please stay tuned for updates from our office on when those dates will be. Lastly, I just want to remember, and I'm trying to take a look around the room. No one jumping out to me yet, but our our board member orientation trainings. As a reminder, these are required trainings for anybody who's been appointed or reappointed to a board within your first year. We have some dates that have been established, and we will send these out, so you don't need to rush to write these down. But just so you know, our next one will be in June 6th. We'll have another one September 18th, and then a follow-up on December 5th. All of these meetings are held in Sacramento. For next year, we are taking a look at holding one of these BMODs down in the Los Angeles area. We've had some interest from a number of our board members on hosting that down there. As I understand, we've done that in the past. We just want to make sure that we would have critical mass, if you will, make sure we have enough board members there who would attend to sort of make the trip worth everyone's while. So stay tuned for an update on that. That's it from the department, unless you have any other further questions.
We're really fortunate that Laura Hendricks from our staff actually will make sure that we all get to that board member orientation. She's very good at keeping us on track.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Laura.
And
From
Chris,
the
hopefully you're
department as
going to
well.
stay for a little while because, as luck would have it, our next two agenda items are licensing and then enforcement.
I'm feeling very lucky, and I will be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Chris. We
Very
really
welcome.
appreciate you coming,
Really
giving this
appreciate it.
report,
Yeah.
and the ongoing collaboration with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, moving on to licensing committee. Stan, what's going on in the licensing world?
Thank you, Madam President, and congratulations, Mr. Incoming President. So, patient consultation requirements for mail order pharmacies or non-resident pharmacies. This is something that we've been concerned about and something we've been talking about for a while. At prior meetings, the licensing committee, there has been discussion on the consultation that is provided to patients who receive medication by way of mail order or by delivery. And so while acknowledging the benefits of convenience, we do have some curiosities and concerns. Whether patients are receiving essential information about how to take their meds appropriately, whether the current requirements of mail order and non-residential pharmacies are sufficient to ensure patients have access to a pharmacist for consultation, big deal, and whether a pharmacist is available to assist the patients, and how the pharmacist can be reached upon patient request, whether the translation services are available when needed, and how patients are advised about those services, and whether patients know where to go when they have complaints. To me, it's surprising, and there's no doubt that it's growing, but about 25% of pharmaceutical sales are going to mail order pharmacies these days, and that's about the best that we can figure out at the board. And so in the packet, fellow board members, you'll find an excerpt from our February 2018 meeting minutes where we have discussed this topic, which is provided in attachment number 1. So our committee directed staff to modify 16 CCR 1707.2, and that's in the packet, with changes to subdivisions B1 and 1707.2B2B. So I hate to read to you, but I'll read 1707.2. 1707.2B1, says that a patient has to be consulted. Point 2B2B is a telephone number shall be provided to the patient from which the patient may obtain oral consultation. And what we discussed at our last meeting was that the pharmacist should be available to speak to the patient no less than 6 days a week for a minimum of 40 hours a week, and that the call should be answered by a pharmacist within 2 minutes. So this was a big point of discussion, and as I go on, you'll see that we came to a resolution on how we feel the board should respond. So in our packet, again, is the draft of the language that I'm going to propose. During our April 19th meeting, was just a couple of weeks ago, the board's chief of enforcement provided a presentation on complaints received by the board concerning mail order pharmacies, and a copy of that presentation is also in the packet under attachment number 1. And we as a committee noted that while the data sample used in the presentation was limited, it did illustrate that there are problems with patient interactions in mail order pharmacies, especially regarding how difficult it is to speak to a pharmacist. In spite of the fact that many testified on the effort that was given to the patients and the policies that were put in place. We discussed the need to balance overregulation, that's a big thing, with the board's mandate to ensure that patients who are often required by insurance to use mail order pharmacies, very often, that they receive the appropriate care. So as part of our deliberations, we reviewed 16 CCR 1707.2. The committee considered it if it is realistic to require phone calls in a mail order pharmacy to be answered by a pharmacist within 2 minutes. The committee also considered if a retail pharmacy that provides delivery services should also be required to have a pharmacist available to answer the phone within 2 minutes of a patient calling. Members of the public, Dennis is here as well, commented that 2 minutes is an unrealistic time frame, especially considering that often there's only one pharmacist on duty in a retail setting, and it usually takes the patient a few minutes to ask a question. So after further discussion and additional input from the public, we, the committee, determined that a patient of a mail order pharmacy or a patient who has had his or her medications delivered should be able to speak to a pharmacist on the phone with an average of 10 minutes. And if the pharmacist is unavailable to speak to the patient within 10 minutes, then a return call must be scheduled to occur within an hour. We felt that was reasonable. The committee also clarified that the customer services representatives, the clerks, and other ancillary pharmacy staff can still triage calls to determine if patients need help with non-pharmacy related questions, such as billing, such as insurance, and such as delivery. So, our committee recommendation, and this is a motion. We directed the staff, by the way, to work on this regulation. So we have a motion, and God, I hate to read it all, but I'll try to just highlight it. It's approve this proposed amendment to 1707.2. A pharmacist shall provide oral consultation to his or her patient or the patient's agent, period, upon request, whenever the pharmacist deems it warranted in the exercise of his or her professional judgment. Then, whenever a prescription drug not previously dispensed to a patient in the same dosage form, strength, or with the same written directions is dispensed by the pharmacy. Then, when the patient or the patient's agent is not present, including but not limited to a prescription drug that was shipped by mail or delivery, a pharmacy shall ensure that the patient receives written notice of his or her right to request consultation. The patient receives written notice of the hours of availability and a telephone number from which the patient may obtain oral consultation from a pharmacist who has ready access to the patient's records. So here we are with the items that I discussed a moment ago. A pharmacist shall be available to speak to a patient or a patient's agent during any regular hours of operation within an average of 10 minutes or less, unless a call is scheduled to occur within 1 hour, 1 business hour, they say, for not less than 6 days a week, and for a minimum of 40 hours a week. So, a pharmacist is not required by the subsection to provide oral consultation to an inpatient healthcare facility, and we've had that in place before. Madam President, that is the gist of our motion, and the licensing committee recommends that the board approve this.
You
So
want to
moved.
actually read our motion to initiate formal?
Right.
Do you want to read that? Just that's the motion's on
Well, we
the.
can do a position first.
You want to read the actual motion? itself?
Approve the amendment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And initiate formal rulemaking.
Right, right.
Do we have any board member questions or comments?
I don't know, Amy, if we need to read the actual motion itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Oh, so we don't need
approve
to
the
make
proposed
one.
amendment,
It's already
and initiate the formal rulemaking process further, delegate to the executive officer the authority to make any non-substantive changes and clarifying changes consistent with the board's policy direction upon recommendation of the control agencies. That's the motion.
That's a motion from the committee.
Right.
So we don't need a second because
No, we
it's a
don't need-
committee. So any board member comments or questions? Public comment.
Good morning, board members. Danny Martinez with the California Pharmacists Association. We did have a robust discussion in the licensing committee, and after speaking with our independents and our smaller retail pharmacies, we support the motion as read and would ask for your support on this.
All right, a fruitful, robust discussion.
Great.
Thank you, Danny.
May I provide a point of
I
clarification?
will add the word fruitful just for you, Stan.
Thank you, you're a good man.
I think Ann has a comment.
Yeah, so that motion that Stan just read is actually not a committee recommendation because the committee did not have the language at the time. So that's a motion that's being offered if that,
Then
there
I
are
would-
there too.
I will
Do you
second
need a
the
motion? Is that
Okay,
it?
so Stan made the motion. Debbie will second it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for that clarification, Ann. Good morning.
That's why we want you to get the
I think
big
it's still
bucks, Ann.
morning. Yeah, good morning.
Good morning, Dennis McAllister, representing Express Scripts. I want to commend the licensing committee for having open and honest discussions with stakeholders, and we got to I think, a compromise that works for the board, works for patients without overregulation, and we support the motion as it is.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
Before you leave,
Chris.
can you put that in writing?
And
That's wonderful, Dennis, thank you.
if I'm,
Hey, Mark.
Mark Johnston with CVS Health. I just want to echo the sentiments of Danny and Dennis. CVS Health also supports this language.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There must be something wrong with it.
so,
Wait a second, this is the grand slam.
What
All you guys are
I'd like to
supporting
call
it.
for the
Something's
vote,
wrong with
please.
it.
so,
Yeah.
Any other public comments?
just very briefly, if I may, excuse my interruption. So I did want to clarify, there were a couple things. So the licensing committee said, this is what we want to do. And then we word crafted it a little bit, which is the reason that the committee didn't make the formal motion.
Yeah.
There were a couple places, and it was included in the motion, but it's the language in brackets that we believed was consistent with what the discussion was. And I think it says business, and those were just things that I wanted to call the licensing committee members' attention to, that we added consistent with the discussion. But they weren't specifically approved by the committee.
I
so.
think you did a good job of.
You did,
Of getting the mood of the moment.
as well as Kelsey.
Great job,
Yeah, the two of
council.
them drafted it.
Wait a minute, this means the council agrees too?
Yeah. It's a foregone conclusion there.
Don't ruin it.
Wow.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
We're ready to sing Kumbaya here. Don't ruin
Good
it.
morning.
Think about
Good
thin
morning.
ice here.
Keaton Patel with Kaiser Permanente. Thank you again for taking this on. As stated at the licensing committee meeting, the intent of the board absolutely remains, positive. But the temporal requirements here, I know we went from 2 minutes to 10 minutes, and I don't know how we got to 6 days. That may have occurred at some other discussions, which I was not a part of. But adding temporal requirements to a regulation, to me, for a clinical practice, for a profession, and although we support the intent, we just question the time ranges that we're being presented with. So I asked the board today just to consider that, and looking for clarity around the 6 days a week. How did that come about?
Statutory. That's actually
Gotcha,
the
okay.
statutory for mail order pharmacies.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we weren't even particularly creative. That's 1987.
Gotcha.
What if the pharmacy's not open 6 days a week?
Right.
The statute requires 6 days, and no one has raised it in nearly 30 years.
So
of
if
the
you
law
have a
being on
mail
the
order,
books.
if you have a mail order pharmacy, you have to be open 6 days a week?
Oh, you
According
have
to-
to have somebody available to counsel the
Available by
patient.
6 days.
I mean, they don't have to be open for
Right.
a pharmacist
consultation.
and have access to the patient's files.
Got it.
And certainly, again, just Kaiser Permanente supports the intent of the board here, but this may require the regulation aspect of it may be difficult to construe as far as a clinical practice in 10 minutes or 2 minutes or
1 hour. It just, to me, it may dampen the profession in some ways.
I'm thinking that what's actually being communicated is that this is the expectation. I'm not sure there's any way you're going to even be able to really document that it
Sure.
was done in 10 minutes, but the expectation is there that you don't keep patients on hold.
Well, and
That
the
is
other
exactly-
thing, the other thing that the language is the average of 10 minutes, and I think
Right.
that was kind of our way of hearing what you have to say because we agree. So it could actually, there could be situations where maybe it would be more than 10 minutes, because of a consultation or something going on. But that's why we specifically added in an average of 10 minutes.
Sure, sure. And
That's a good point, Debbie.
Yeah, that's
So it's an average of 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and it's a guideline, I think, also in the sense that we were hearing, the pharmacist will call you back within 48 to 72 hours was unacceptable.
Absolutely
And this is
unacceptable.
to prevent that queuing where you stay online for a long time and can't break through it.
Certainly agree with
So-
that.
Is
And
the
this is
pharmacy
a-
expected to track the data and be able to provide it to the inspector
I
of
think
the
they
average
do.
10 minutes?
They track how long, because a lot of the mail order
Yeah, the big ones do.
stakeholders came forward
Good.
and said they knew that.
Okay.
And
Okay.
this is just, so if you know in 1 minute that I'm not going to get this person within a reasonable amount of time, then you say, I'll
Yeah.
call you back within an hour.
Yeah.
Makes total sense.
Perfect sense. Thank you very much.
Thank
The
you.
rest of the world does.
Okay, so we have a
Motion and
motion
a
by
second.
Stan, second by Debbie. Oh, Ricardo, did you have a question? Yeah. Any other public comment? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Stan,
Outstanding. Thank you, everybody.
good job.
So,
So did you say that outstanding?
outstanding.
Did you emphasize the stand part of that?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So moving along, agenda item B, the discussion and consideration of proposed requirements for mail order pharmacies or non-resident pharmacies to notify patients of the availability of translation services and to notify patients of how to file a complaint with the board. So the background again, at our January meeting, the committee members discussed concerns regarding mail order patients not receiving translation information as well as notification on how to file a complaint with the board. So the discussion was during the meeting, members heard testimony from representatives of mail order pharmacies regarding that what information is currently provided to patients on the availability of translation services and the number of patients who use translation services. And once again, thanks to those who represent that industry, they're always helpful with information, and we're looking for more information from them because after the hearing testimony from the public, we determined, the committee that is, that we needed more information that it should be gathered to determine if there actually is a problem with patients not receiving information on translation services. So we directed board staff to work with some of the large mail order pharmacies to determine how many patients use translation services, what information is currently provided to the patients when they receive their meds, and how patients are provided the information, which are the paper handouts and emails, et cetera. And we also asked that this information be provided by the June licensing committee meeting for discussion and consideration. And I checked earlier to see if any was available, and it's not quite available. But thank you for being in there for us and continuing to seek out that information for our benefit. So we don't have any other information or action other than what I just reported. If there's any comment from other board members or the public, we'd be more than happy to hear that. Agenda item number C is an update on the implementation of the board-provided law and ethics
Do you need to
continuing
do
education
public
class.
comment at
Beg your
all?
pardon?
Do you need to do public comment?
I asked if there was,
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay.
but if there is, that's great. We're looking forward to it.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, great. So a new requirement for pharmacist license renewal is that 2 of the 30 units of continuing education credit required must be earned by completing a board-provided, Danny, board-provided CE program in law and ethics. And this
Board.
requirement becomes effective for all pharmacist renewals after July 1st, 2019. And so the requirement is that in 1732.5, so I'm going to go to B, which says that, which is the additional language. that at least 2 of the 30 hours required for pharmacist license renewal shall be completed by participation in a board-provided CE course in law and ethics. Pharmacists renewing their license, which expire on or after July 1st, 2019, shall be subject to the requirements of this subdivision. So, is that a motion that we want to deal with now? Is it something we don't have to deal with? Okay, good. Okay. So, staff developed a program that covers the 2018 new pharmacy laws. The program has been presented live several times and has been taped for placement on the board's website. However, the program does not contain an ethics component. So when the requirements for a CE program were developed, the board did not discuss in depth what it intended to include on the ethics piece of this. Attachment number 2 that's in our board packet, there's a few items. One is an article published January 15 issue of 2018, the California Journal of Health Sciences, entitled A Problem in Pharmacy, Ethics a Problem in Pharmacy. Additional thing in our packet is information gathered by our executive officer, Virginia, for discussion with Lori Rice, who is the former board executive officer here, and UCSF School of Pharmacy professor, who instructed UCSF students in pharmacy ethics. She's a very nice lady, by the way. She is a nice lady. And additionally, a copy of the board regulation titled CFR Title 16, 1773.5, establishing specific ethics programs developed by the board that used to refer pharmacists in disciplinary cases or citation cases. So, the committee reported that the 2018 new pharmacy law webinar is in the final stage of development, and the webinar will be available on the board's website and will contain quiz questions to ensure that the pharmacists are participating in the webinar. Board staff stated that an ethics webinar could be created in a similar format, which is great. The course, as I said, would still be provided by the board at no cost to licensees by way of the board's website and at live events. So as part of the deliberations, the committee reviewed the materials from the author of the California Journal of Health Science Pharmacy and Dr. Rice, and recommended the board staff use them as subject matter experts who, during the creating of the CE course. So the committee directed board staff to work on a subject matter and experts to develop a CE course that focuses on ethical issues that arise in the practice and uses board investigations and enforcement actions as examples of what a pharmacist could, should, would do when an ethical issue occurs. And so the committee will continue to receive updates on the status of the project. And that takes care of that agenda item unless there's some questions or issues.
Question, Stan. So if a pharmacist attend one of these board-sponsored meetings, like with DEA for 6 hours, would that satisfy that CE requirement that due in July 2019?
Should.
The board has approved that. We're going to talk a little bit about that during the EO report in a little while. But yes, that particular one, the board has approved the 6 hours of CE to count towards the law and ethics requirement.
Okay, we good? Okay, D, an update on implementing pharmacist license with photo identification. So, believe it or not, yes, did you want to say something, sir?
Did you get a card?
Absolutely, and it's my recollection that you have some experience with the law.
Or ethics.
Probably need even more. Fred Weissman, pharmacist. I wanted to let the board know that the School of Pharmacy, in collaboration with about 3 other schools of pharmacy, in terms of their legal individuals that present pharmacy law and ethics, are putting together a CE program in August. Now, I don't know if the 2 hours can in some way be provided through this program, and how might I allow those 2 hours to be gotten to be recognized? Is there a possibility on that or not?
I'm
And
gonna defer it to our executive officer.
Right, I didn't bring
Or
the
you.
schedule, but there are 6 separate lectures that deal with different aspects of pharmacy law and also ethics.
We appreciate you providing such a program because it's valuable, I think, to the pharmacists in general. In the specific requirement that we have, the intent of the board was that the board would control the content of these 2 units so that it was truly board developed, board provided, and was the origin of it. So it's a way the board really can speak to pharmacist licensees in a manner that they don't really do routinely now, and that all pharmacists licensed in California will have to do this.
Sure.
So the answer probably, unless you work more specifically with us, in which case then the board perhaps could sanction it. The intent would be is that it would be provided free and it would be provided by the board through a diversity of sources. And on the ethics thing in particular, we were having difficulty. Do we talk theory? Do we talk application? Do we talk a little of both? And so the board kind of, the committee wanted more of a situational set thing, that here's an example where something didn't go right, where are the ethics of this, what's the law side of it, and try to educate that way. And we're going to see a presentation, I believe, in a few minutes that kind of gets at it when we talk a little bit about our citation and fine program.
Okay, and in terms of the people that are going to be involved in putting together the 2 hours of law sessions, do you have a specific exclusivity arrangement, or is that an open?
You're looking at us. It's us, pretty much. The board viewed itself as the provider of the course. The CE program that we're talking about for prescription drug abuse, that's kind of a collaborative effort by the board, working sometimes with the DEA, working with UCSD School of Pharmacy to provide a naloxone unit, for example, which is outside the realm, but it still counts generally. So I don't, the board did not envision so much, I don't think, and this is maybe an opportunity for discussion in this area, whether or not it wished to have contracted services provided in. It was intended to be board provided based on.
Given that you've used the name University of California, San Francisco, is there consideration of broadening that to other schools of pharmacy that have developed pharmacy law programs?
Well, the UCSF
and curriculum?
component, I'm sorry, Fred, I'm sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead
no,
and finish.
pardon.
I apologize. I couldn't wait to answer. UCSF, their former professor, who also used to be the executive officer of the board, I knew was involved. And so when I was trying to put together a component for ethics to bring to the board, I contacted her and I contacted Dr. Yoshikura. And I know I pronounced your name wrong, Keith, sorry. The intent was to get outside seating for where the board would go, but the board wanted to kind of look, after they saw the citation and fine program, they decided, I think, that they wanted to use that as a component for the re-education for this component of ethics. But as this is just the first iteration of this, we don't envision this as a static program, that we think over time we're going to continue to add to it. And so we'd be interested in seeing what you've done and see
So-
if there's some way to build upon that.
Well, my recommendation would be that I think there should be inclusion of perhaps the other schools of pharmacy. If you're, allowing that to be something that's going to continue and develop, I think it'd be important so that, the other schools are not left out.
Well, it wasn't intended to exclude anyone. It was more to help the executive officer come up with a plan for where to go.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And so in that, it was informal. It was a few hours of her time and my time as we
Okay.
tried to work together.
But there will be consideration for perhaps.
We want a valuable, meaningful course. We
Okay.
don't want pharmacists to sit online and go to sleep, which is why in part we're doing the quiz, so you can't go to sleep. But the other part of it is so that there really is a value in attending the CE. And
I
so
think it's
that
impo-
requires good educators, which
Yeah.
is our School
I'm-
of Pharmacy.
Yeah, and I'm
So-
certainly
so the answer
glad,
is yes.
And I need to commend the
Thank you, Greg.
board for
Get
at
me out of
least
this.
looking at the requirement that there be a mandatory provision And especially where you have the 6 hours of which law and ethics is a portion of that inclusion.
One of the things, though, and actually Mr. Weiser referred to it just a moment ago when he solicited Mr. Martinez, was specifically it's board provided, not association provided or someone else. The board really wants to retain some authorship. At least at the time we promulgated the reg, that's what was intended.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
But we'll,
Thank you.
but there'll be an opportunity to discuss this.
As long as that's given consideration,
Absolutely.
I'd be very
All right.
pleased. Thank you.
Any other public? Danny?
Our kumbaya lasted 10 minutes, Stan. No. I don't want to belabor this point because I know it's established. I just want to go on record for the board to hear that CPHA's position is that we would like the board to consider any ACPE program to be allowed to do this, understanding that there, in the almost 1 year now that I've been with CPHA, it'll be a year later this month. I've understood or come to understand that there are just some of our members want CPHA provided CE, whether it's law and ethics, whether it's whatever else we offer, and would feel more comfortable. What we kind of want is the option. We're not arguing that this shouldn't be free, and in fact would actually kind of support that because it is mandatory that this specific courses be offered. What we want is the option to either have it free from you guys, or if we or other entities, whether it be an association, a school of pharmacy, or what have you, want to have the option to be able to provide it as well and have it count towards the CE. We don't want to get in the way of any sort of financial burdens if people need to complete that to maintain their license. We just kind of, what you guys were just talking about, in hopes of advancing this discussion, you guys would consider at least the option to have other entities provide this as well, whether it be as a standalone or whether it be working with you guys or working with the schools as well.
Thank you, Danny.
And Stan, is the board-sponsored CE, we'll make that available electronically, so there won't be any limitations, not just in person. So the flexibility for attendees to attend will be there, they just need a computer.
Right. And
I think we're envisioning a webinar.
Great.
right.
That'll be recorded?
It's, well, we already recorded part of it. There are questions being integrated in, and that should be available shortly. The goal now is this ethics piece so that we can do it, and there'll be a 2020 law too, so we've got another one. Really, that yelling didn't come over. They could probably hear me up in Sacramento. What did you do this?
It's on.
There's two red lights.
You're special.
Yeah, I don't.
We can hear you.
Okay. I lost the train of thought, but
As long as it's available, I mean, the only concern to Danny's comment, just to make sure that it's a flexible, pharmacists work all hours.
Right.
And it's hard to schedule, as long as it's on demand, you can actually watch it.
Exactly.
I don't think there's an issue with continuing this way.
And one of the proposals the Communication Public Ed Committee is considering is possibly to give 1 hour of CE by having them read the newsletter. And so there would be the way for over a course of a 2-year period to earn the 2 units there.
And also, just for clarification, one of the things we talked about at the committee level was also that there's nothing prohibiting additional CE in law and ethics. So the option exists for all of those schools to offer CE, additional CE in law and ethics. There's no prohibition. A person can take 10 hours in law and ethics if they want to. It's just that these particular 2 hours would be required by the board under the current regulation.
I just want to make a comment. The rationale of this piece is not really the board really want to pick on pharmacists study the law, or rather to preclude any school of pharmacy in sponsoring the law classes. Actually, the history of this issue, because the board feel like the licensee should have more connections to the Board of Pharmacy activities. So we are trying to encourage the participation of licensee to come to board meetings or to attend something to know what is the update of the current event of the Board of Pharmacy. That's the main purpose. It's not to say we really want you to study 2 hours of law. So this is what we propose. I want to make sure that we understand we're not trying to do something to pick one over the other.
Thank you, Victor. Any other public comment? Board members, are we okay to move along? Okay. So as I said a bit earlier, the board has actually encountered individuals posing as pharmacists and providing fake licenses for employment purposes. It's a threat to the health and safety and welfare of California consumers. An unlicensed person posing as a pharmacist certainly does not meet any of our intent with regard to pharmacy services and capabilities that we want the consumer to have. So at our July meeting of 2017, the board staff proposed implementing a photo ID for pharmacists. Currently, the license that we have, the wallet license, is easy to duplicate. And so it's our hope that a picture on it might make it less difficult, not as easy. So staff recommended a phased approach.
Is your mic on?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Am I better? So anyway.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. I feel like I'm at my bar mitzvah, for God's sake. Anyway. So the board directed staff to use a phased approach, beginning with newly licensed pharmacists and adding current pharmacists based on their renewal. The board also discussed the need to have a photo updated periodically. I mean, I know it's hard to believe, but I probably look significantly different than I did 10 years ago. So, and probably
Not really.
10 years from now. So every 10 years is what we're kind of talking about. Following the July 2017 board meeting, staff determined that while the current pharmacist pocket license states, please sign and carry with you, there is no authority to require pharmacists to carry their pocket license on their person. Additionally, the board does not have the authority to require a pharmacist, upon initial licensure or renewal, to pay an additional fee to a vendor for a photo ID without a change in the regulation or the statute. So in light of this information, board staff brought this item back to the committee and recommends implementing a voluntary pharmacist photo ID program while simultaneously pursuing a reg to make the pharmacist photo ID a requirement and regulation. So the voluntary phase, the board may begin offering this option for pharmacist photo ID as soon as the contract with our current exam vendor, PSI, can be amended and the programming and or manual tracking can be implemented. PSI currently administers the CPJE and will provide it for an easy transition. While PSI does not offer biometrics, safeguard measures will be added and will serve a similar purpose for unique identification and verification. PSI offers locations in California and throughout the U.S. For current licensees to take their photographs. Exam candidates would be notified through exam instructions, exam candidate handbooks, and board website. Current pharmacists would be notified through the subscriber alerts, the website, and our newsletter. The board would track when new and current licensed pharmacists obtain photo IDs. So then there's the mandatory phase. And upon beginning with the regulation, the board would require all active pharmacists to maintain a photo ID and to update that every 10 years. And I've got a timeline, which is, I'm not going to go through because it's questionable if it's a real timeline or one that can be achieved. It's a real timeline. So anyway, the committee, during the meeting, the committee reviewed the staff's recommendations and this timeline to begin a voluntary photo ID program while simultaneously working to implement a mandatory requirement for photo ID for all pharmacists. So the committee members noted that photo IDs could still be counterfeited. However, they agreed that mandating a photo ID would add an additional barrier for someone who is attempting to pose as a pharmacist and will provide employers an additional way to verify that applicant's identity. As before, members of the public expressed support of mandating photo IDs and stated that the current pharmacist pocket license is easily destroyed, counterfeited, and lost. The committee directed board staff to implement a voluntary pharmacist photo ID program while simultaneously working with legal counsel to draft language to make the pharmacist photo ID a requirement. We further ask board staff to provide a sample of the photo ID at our next committee meeting. And the committee also asks staff to provide an overview of the process for pharmacists to obtain that photo ID, including locations for taking the photo, price, the photo ID, price of the ID, payment options, and a time frame for receiving the photo ID from the vendor. So our latest update, following the committee meeting, the board staff has begun the process of implementing the voluntary ID program, and board staff is also working with legal counsel to draft language to make the photo IDs mandatory for all pharmacists by July 1st, 2019. And the language, as well as additional information requested by the committee, will be provided hopefully at our June 2018 committee meeting. So, board members, anything that you would like to ask or contribute? Victor?
Alan. That's Alan.
I know that, but Victor raised his hand, and I recognized him.
I thought you were calling him Victor. Sorry.
But
What
that's
other
okay.
boards
Alan,
have this requirement?
Your input is always critical.
Will
at
somebody
this
listen to me down here?
Alan, are you in the same area code that we are over here?
I don't
do
think
any
your
other
mic's
boards have
on. Is your mic even on?
Go ahead.
All right, now?
Yeah.
Do any other boards have this requirement?
Yes.
Who?
Which boards?
The Board of Registered Nursing uses it.
Okay, and you know, it seems to me that that my driver's license and my pharmacy license both have my name on them, and one has a picture. It seems like this is a lot of effort for something that I think. I don't know that it's truly necessary for.
Well, I think where we were going with this is that, like, if I'm a board inspector and I'm in a pharmacy and there was comments about, we're supposed to keep our pocket license with us, but, they're kind of fragile.
Right.
And so this would be a way that if a board inspector was in there, it'd be kind of a one-stop shop that the board inspector could ask for your pocket license, and there would be your license, your number, your picture. It would kind of be all in one spot.
Well, but like Alan said, I mean, you're typically going to have your driver's license with you too.
Well,
so
not everybody
you can
has a
always show
driver's
it.
license, though. So what do we,
They wouldn't have a
How
driver's
How many
license?
pharmacists do you know that
Possibly,
don't have a
it's-
driver's license?
Well, I mean, it's possible. So what do we have them do? Carry along a passport where they don't have passport? I mean, it's just a convenient way to,
I am so.
to have the picture.
Interestingly, it is lots of organizations and boards and use an ID with a picture. I mean, where we discussed this at Chapman University, at their School of Pharmacy, to get into the building, you had to go to a little gizmo machine, put in all your information, and stand in front of a camera, and it took your picture. So to get into the building that we were in at Chapman, this gizmo generated a visitor's pass with your picture on it.
That's why we don't go to Chapman.
So by the way, Greg, you were at that meeting with my picture.
So if the problem is that the licenses are too flimsy, can we just change the material we do the licenses and make? Because I'm with Alan.
Well,
I
there's no
think
doubt.
why are we going to have another card to have to carry around with a picture?
Well, they're supposed to carry around the card, right?
Right, but you were saying they're too flimsy because they're paper. So could we make them?
This is a good opportunity as we go forward for us to look at ways that we can update our license.
I mean, I don't know. I have a picture ID for my company. I have a picture ID for the board, that little thing we have. I mean, I think it's kind of normal. And it came out of, we actually had a pharmacist, and probably more than two pharmacists who were, I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but they were like, posing as pharmacists, and they weren't.
Go right ahead, Victor.
Okay, finally, I got to say something here. In this state of technology, why can you cross-reference with DMV, with whatever, to coordinate to make one driver license with one special ID encoded versus a pharmacist? You could be a color picture, color code in the back, or whatever that signify a pharmacist, a doctor, or a nurse in one single ID. Otherwise, you'll be carrying a whole pocket full of IDs. golf club members, Medicare members, Kaiser members. Jesus,
That's
I mean,
a great idea, but I don't think we can do anything about that at the
and in the
pharmacy
future,
board.
actually, in the future, this is what happened. You're gonna have one universal ID
You're
that will
right.
have everything encoded in it. You could pay everything. You could identify yourself, your health ID, and everything. This is what's gonna be in the future. So why won't we think about something in the future rather than just get a separate ID?
Chris, you're still here, and might I ask you if you might have any information that you could share with us regarding photo IDs with and other agencies using them? I don't mean to put you on the spot. But
Well, you
probably
did.
too late.
Yeah, do we know who you are?
I do have photo identification. We haven't had this discussion at length at the executive level, but certainly willing to work with the board in terms of what you all might be looking at with respect to this.
Great, thank
Yeah.
you very much.
You're
I
welcome.
didn't mean to. I
No,
apologize.
you're fine. No worries.
But you say nurses do have it.
Yeah, BRN's been using it for a number of years.
I believe that there are a couple of programs within DCA that already have it as part of our implementation strategy that we've been discussing. It was leveraging the existing process that's already in place for several of the boards. At one of the committee meetings, we provided 5 different samples, and I believe the one that's on the screen is the one that the committee and the board agreed to pursue because it does have some safety features involved. But we are leveraging the existing infrastructure, just allowing that to apply to our board as well.
So that would be instead of the current ID?
Well, it's not, yeah,
We would
instead of the
still-
paper
the paper
license.
Instead of it.
We have a paper. Does anyone have one on
I
them?
might have.
I have mine.
Yeah, I think I might actually-
do.
Does anyone in the room have their paper license?
Only
And
Yeah.
see if they can
only
show
licensed
it?
pharmacists do. There you go.
What's that, a
Here you
cell
go, here's
phone?
mine.
Look at this. And mine is still valid.
Well, can
Does
I?
it look like this?
Yes, it
This
does.
is what we're- this is the current
Yes.
license.
I
for
need
the
that
Board of
back because
This
I've
is
got a
the Board of
part-time
Accounts.
job
Yeah.
this
It
weekend.
says,
Yeah, it looks exactly the same.
There we go.
Yeah.
That makes me real. right
Wait,
there.
I want to know where.
Can everyone? Oh, look at them all hold it. Look at all those
They all
licenses.
have it,
Woo-hoo!
yes.
Well,
The
there.
former board president.
There's
yes.
compliance on the right side of the room
Hey,
there.
here's mine.
Thank you, Delma.
I'm going to
Left
meet you
side?
guys.
Thank you, Stan.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, it's exactly the same as mine. I
There's
mean,
a guy that
except
took
it's got
action.
your
I got
name on
mine.
it, so it's-
This doesn't even look used.
See?
Okay.
Here,
Sir, did you want to add something to our
somewhere.
public comment?
The only reason this is signed is it's brand new. The one I had before
Ray
was-
Vrabel, pharmacist. I hate carrying any card. And I think we, as Victor mentioned, I think we need to move to the future with technology. I prefer to only shop at places that take my watch, my Apple, for Apple Pay. If you wanted, and I think what's proposed, although I haven't evaluated it, it looks like it costs a lot of money and it's backward facing from a technology standpoint. And we need to be forward facing. If you want to do the minimal, take the existing card, put a 2D barcode on the back, or a single 1D barcode, whatever, that somebody can link and see your picture on the same page on the board where you see your other license information, and that can include a signature too. That allows anybody, anywhere, to confirm who the person they are with a picture that's easily accessible on the board.
Sounds good to me.
We don't need another card. And like I said, I have my pharmacy license. I took a picture of it. It's on my phone. I can display it to you on my watch if necessary. There's no need to carry things today. We're in the 21st century. You're presenting a 20th at best century solution to something that's not a big problem.
I think the
Thank
paper
you
these
for your
are on
high
is from the
grades.
18th century.
Obviously, you don't have a room in this hotel because to get one, you have to show them your driver's license with your picture. So wherever you're staying, I hope you're enjoying the accommodations, right? Okay.
So I just have a question for our attorneys. Is if someone carries a picture of the card, is that adequate?
For valid ID.
Yeah.
Because it says you're supposed to have your card on your. Well, but there might be others, and I like your socks, by the way. There might be others.
We finally got to a
They,
point
they
where
won't
we have
record that.
headlights now.
So if you want to look at it in the minutes, it'll never appear.
Okay. Shall we
Oh.
move along?
Well, perhaps. I think,
Wait.
I'm not sure the board's all on the same page here, and so I think we ought to decide if we're
Well,
not
we
going
have
to go
to
in
do
this
something,
direction.
right?
Yeah, if we're not going to do this, it's fine. I think one of the things that we will do nevertheless, and I think it's actually in the development phase, is to alert licensees that when you're hiring people to work in your pharmacy, you need to make sure that that
License lookup.
individual in front of you is in fact who he or she says they are, because those paper licenses are far too easy to put a different name on them and present them as someone else. And now, this has happened twice in a relatively short period of time for pharmacists. We've got even a tech that's assumed the identity of another tech. So, and in one of the cases, somebody had worked their way through, supposedly started as a clerk, worked through becoming a tech, stopped there, but then supposedly went to pharmacy school. The person never graduated from pharmacy school, said he or she had, produced a pharmacist license and worked for a couple of years in a pharmacy as a pharmacist without ever completing school. It sounds unbelievable, but because no one ever did a full check, and this person had assumed the identity of someone else for purposes of becoming a
I
pharmacist.
think it's problematic if you just even rely on that paper license, because
Yeah,
the
that's what I'm saying.
online is a lot more accurate, because when actions are taken on the license, you're not going to know by looking at this paper license.
You need
So-
both. I think you need both.
Do we
So I
have,
realize that this isn't something that's an action item, but maybe we could get a sense about the mood of the board with an informal vote or whatever our attorneys will allow us to do, to see if we want, if the board is supportive of going forward
Right.
with a voluntary and then mandatory program, or if the board isn't, to allow staff to spend their time, dealing with issues that we do want.
Here's one other idea. There's a license lookup that people can check to see if the person's licensed, check on their license. What if the board had the pictures of each pharmacist on there when they do the license lookup and they see the picture? That way you don't have to carry anything. That way it's a very simple
Well, it
situation.
doesn't change the process we just described, right? It
Right.
just changes where the picture
availability,
appears.
Well, it won't be on a card. It'll just be on the website.
But it doesn't
where
change
you
the
look up
process.
the
So whether
license.
we print a license with the picture, we
Mhm.
still have to get the license through a valid measure, or else, like I said, at Chapman, I put your name in my picture, they didn't know the difference. I mean, so
Yeah, well, your driver's license will tell
they
who
did
you are.
see our
That-
driver's
that's the
license.
point.
we had to, so we
figure
were
that
actually
out,
looking at
too.
some sort of biometric, and this group can't do it, the first group we're going to go with, but, part of getting the pictures, we have to make sure we get the right picture with the right name. So it has to be done very carefully, and, I honestly, sorry if anybody in here works for DMV, but I don't trust the DMV to help me match up the picture with the license, so I know that sounds like a
Really?
good idea, but, they have a hard time, with some technical things. But I would support, I think the committee felt very strongly that this was a good way to go, and we got no
Right,
pushback
at our
from the
committee
public.
meeting, everybody, nobody from the public seemed to be concerned that this wasn't going to be a good idea, and so, but again.
Now Danny's going to come up and ruin it.
Again,
but-
I think that having the view of the board rather than a vote would be advantageous to staff. Hey,
Right.
Danny, did you want
Got it.
No? Okay.
I just want to address that. I was at the licensing committee at Chapman, and I did not, you're correct, I did not say anything then, because I really didn't feel comfortable saying something that we weren't, as an association, kind of unanimous on. Since that meeting, I have received some quiet, anonymous phone calls from our members saying...
This isn't going to be fake news, is it?
No, it is not. No, it is 100% true. We've gotten some calls with some concerns about this mandatory phase. And actually, what I'd like to bring up also is that during the same committee, and I'm not sure if it was Ginny or somebody else, but somebody else brought up the fact that the vendor that you guys would be going with is only for a certain period of time. I think it's 3 years. And then after that 3 years, you guys don't know whether it's going to be the same vendor that you're going to be working with. And that's at that point is when you're going to be entering the mandatory phase of this plan. I will apologize for not saying anything. Like I said, I didn't feel really comfortable then saying anything. Hearing the discussions now between the board and some of the public, I have to say that we're not too thrilled about this, and we want to be able to work on alternative methods because the goal is we don't want anybody to impersonate pharmacists, and that's a goal that we absolutely share. We would rather work on alternative solutions to that, and so that's where we stand.
Well, another thing is, when I hire somebody, I do a full background check. I would think that a pharmacy, if they're going to hire a pharmacist, would do a full background check.
I will say, without naming the pharmacist, one of the comments that was said to me was, if I'm going to invest so much money in my independent pharmacy and comply with all the regulations that the board's telling me, I'm going to make sure everyone in my pharmacy that's working for me is who they are. And this just seems very unnecessary. So that's the comments that I'll make.
Thank you. So once again, Madam President, I would ask to get a sense of what the board's view is on this, because we are at a point of whether or not staff is going to go forward or not.
All those in favor of providing the printed card, raise your hand, just so that Stan can get a vote.
No, which card?
If those of you that are in favor of moving forward with that printed card that's behind us on the screen.
Well, it's with the picture.
With the picture. With this printed, I assume it's a plastic card, is that right?
I don't know.
That's what the committee had agreed
And I
upon?
believe the fee was $16 or $19.
Okay.
$16 or $19. If move forward with that, please raise your hand. All those opposed, raise your hand. Okay.
And the outcome
Did you
is?
get your answer? I think the outcome is no.
Didn't pass.
Opposed.
Okay. Well, that settles that agenda item.
So, well, I'm sorry, the vote was what?
4-6.
Oh,
So
6
cor-
opposed?
6 opposed.
So can we all get a field trip to Chapman now?
Okay. Moving along.
Can I make
Did you need more information?
So was that for everybody, or are we still going to make it for those that wish to on a voluntary basis? There was 2 phases to this plan. One was for people that would like this option. Are we dropping the entire thing or just the mandatory piece? I apologize.
My sense was that there was not any support for us to continue
So,
with the idea.
and can I just ask, I'm just asking because of Greg's comment, is it possible that what would it cost, or is it plausible that if a pharmacist, if I were to send you my picture, you could upload it on our database online as a verification rather than having this card? Is that a lot of work?
We're happy to look into whatever you would want us to do. I think that we would probably need to explore whether or not that creates privacy concerns. Our law makes someone's address of record and their license itself public information. I'm not sure that a photo is as well. So we'll
It's
just
not.
need to explore. It's not.
You don't
Okay.
need to look that up.
It's
The
not.
information
I
practice
think
is
also has
central.
done that for me. So we'll have to. I don't know whether or not we could overcome those policies.
So wait, what did Laura say?
So the Information Practices Act is a law that applies to all state agencies, and it prohibits certain types of personal information from being displayed.
So a picture would be
a specific
personal?
exemption to that are addresses of record, and your photo would not be. Now there might be some ways of doing it voluntarily if the board could develop the infrastructure to do that
So you can't
information,
have the
but
photo?
you couldn't require it without a change in law.
Got
You
it.
couldn't
But I also
require
feel,
the
I don't
photo
think
be
we would
posted.
want to do that, because what's our control that you're sending the right picture?
That would be a win for the board. We'd
So,
have to
I mean,
figure that
these
out.
people that
Yeah.
were imposters, they could just send the wrong picture, and now, I mean, right now, I think we have some control, and now we enter in, crap out.
Yeah, I guess they'd actually have to go like a DMV to a place to have their picture taken.
Well, so that's what we propose, that's our proposal, but.
When they do their live scan,
Yeah.
yeah, okay,
But when-
sorry,
but
I
when
didn't
they
want
apply- when
to
they-
complicate
But when they
things.
graduate from pharmacy school and apply for a new licensure with the board at that time, they have to submit with some photo pictures, right?
they give us pictures, but we also validate the pictures when they show up for the exam.
The other thing you got to consider, though, is that people are going to change over time. I mean,
No, we're not.
the DMV actually has
Well,
requirements.
Part of the deal was you
revoting.
had to update your picture every 10 years.
Oh.
Okay.
Well,
Have
can-
we sufficiently
Hold
beat
on.
that horse?
I think we, I think
No,
that-
wait a minute. We do not beat horses in this
I
organization.
beg your pardon,
Okay.
Debbie. I beg
Poor
your pardon.
Debbie. We all use that example, too.
Okay.
We need a disclaimer
I'm going to move
about
along,
the treatment of
regardless how
animals.
politically incorrect I am. So, discussion and consideration to amend Business and Professional Code 4200 relating to the North American Pharmacist Licensure Exam, otherwise known as NAPLEX, and the California Practice Standards and Jurisprudence Exam for pharmacists, commonly referred to as CPJE. And attachment number 3 has information for you. So the relevant law is that BPC Section 4200 establishes the licensing requirements for a pharmacist. BPC Section 4200 A6 requires the board to accept the passing examination score on NAPLEX and also on CPJE on or after January 1st, 2004. 4200.3 requires the examination process shall be regularly reviewed pursuant to Section 139 and meet the established standards and guidelines. 139 establishes an occupational analysis, and this is a key thing, and the examination validation studies are fundamental components of the licensure program. So BPC Section 139 requires that the Department of Consumer Affairs, as Chris, to develop policy regarding examination development and validation and occupational analysis for all boards, programs, bureaus, and divisions under its jurisdiction. So as required by BPC 139, the Department of Consumer Affairs developed the licensure examination validation policy. The policy requires boards offering licensure exams to conduct an occupational analysis every 5 years, so that a detailed outline content, known as DCO, may be developed based on current professional practice. From the DCO, the licensure exam is developed. The policy also outlines requirements for ensuring validation of the licensing exam. So, the board currently administers the CPJE as one of its required exams for licensure in California as a pharmacist. Pharmacist licensure candidates must obtain a passing score on both the CPJE and NAPLEX prior to being licensed as a pharmacist. Every 5 years, as part of the occupational analysis, the profession of pharmacy in California is reassessed. And the analysis includes a review of job-related critical tasks and the knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary to practice pharmacy. Based on the reassessment of the profession, the DCO, as I said, detailed content outline, is updated to ensure that the licensure exam reflects current pharmacy practice in California. Recently, board staff has noticed a trend of pharmacists, applicants, having passed the NAPLEX or the CPJE more than 5 years ago. Because the occupational analysis is conducted every 5 years, a passing score from more than 5 years ago really doesn't reflect or demonstrate that the applicant has met the minimum qualifications based on current practice standards. For example, the most recent occupational analysis of a CPJE was completed in 2014. Therefore, if a candidate passed the CPJE in 2012, the passing score no longer represents a demonstration of minimum competency for 2018. The intent of BCP 4200, 4200.3, and 139 is to ensure that an applicant is issued a pharmacist license relatively soon after receiving a passing score on both CPJE and NAPLEX. However, pursuant to Section 4200, the board may license a pharmacist licensure candidate who has passed NAPLEX or CPJE on or after January 1st, 2004. So, as currently written, 4200 is not aligned with the intent of 139 and the DCA's licensure examination validation policy. Yeah, so, as passing scores are being accepted in accordance with the statute without regard to when the most recent occupational analysis was conducted, board staff reached out to the DCA Office of Professional Examination Services regarding the issue. They advised board staff that an examination score is only valid during the current occupational analysis exam content. So to ensure that an applicant has met the minimum competency at the time of licensure, the committee may wish to consider amending its regulations to only accept CPJE passing score during the current occupational analysis and exam content. Additionally, the committee may also wish to consider only accepting NAPLEX passing score from the current occupational analysis unless the applicant is currently, and now this is the exception, which is a big one, unless the applicant is currently licensed as a pharmacist in another state. So, even if the applicant is licensed in another state, he or she still has to take the CPJE. So currently the board has 44 applicants who passed the CPJE over 5 years ago, and 256 applicants who passed NAPLEX over 5 years ago, and they do not hold a pharmacist license in another state. So if the board amends its regulations, it would result in these applicants having to retake the CPJE and or NAPLEX. So from a legal standpoint, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So from a legal standpoint, attorneys, so we have people in queue waiting to take the exam, and they're waiting to take the exam, and they conform to current policy, I guess. At least if they don't conform to it, the board has allowed others to do the same. So there's a pattern that has already been going on. So if we do something today, what is going to be their position in queue, and will they have to go back and retake either or both exams?
So we talked about this in the office, and if Ann or Jenny, you guys want to bring that up, please feel free to chime in. But because we talked about this as being a very real issue. So the board's initial licensure for pharmacists is kind of a two-step process. So for someone who hasn't taken the exam yet, there's an application to take the exam. After the person has successfully passed the exam, then the person applies for a license. And there's sort of it's a two-stage application process. And the concern is that the people who applied to take the exam and took the exam and passed it, then we sent the application for licensure, but then they never got licensed. And I think that's the concern.
And they're not working in another state.
So for the people who
licensed in
have
another state.
dropped their application for the licensure, and that is at the board, it is going to be valid at the time that that application for licensure was submitted. So if for some reason it's in enforcement, or we're waiting for fingerprints or something like that, then the validity under the proposed change would tie to the time that the application for the license actually came into the board office. So that if the exam content changed tomorrow, that application is valid at the time the person's application for license came in.
So
That
I'm
answer
hearing
your
you say that this group of people, these 300 people, regardless of what we do today, it's not going to impact them being eligible for licensure, or it is?
So it depends on when they submit their application for licensure. So
Well, we
they've
know they've
already
submitted it
applied to
because-
take the exam.
Because we know how many there are.
So Stan, I believe that those numbers, so they have to take and pass both exams. So what you have in there are people that have passed the CPJE but have not passed the NAPLEX. So they're not eligible for licensure. And then the converse, those that have passed the NAPLEX during a period of time that's outside of what this proposal will do, but have not passed the CPJE.
Okay, so regardless, they would have to,
Correct.
okay, got it.
But the real focus is that for 5 years, these individuals at least have not been working in
Well, and I
pharmacy.
understand that.
Okay.
Yeah, I just didn't want us to get in a bit of a legal corner as we're trying to go forward with these people in particular.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you very much, Laura and Ann. So during the committee meeting, members discussed the importance of having an applicant demonstrate that they have met the minimum competency requirements to practice pharmacy in California at the time of application for licensure. The committee noted that the practice of pharmacy has changed drastically, to say the least, in the past few years, and an exam from 2004 certainly wouldn't reflect the current practice standards of 18. Our executive officer explained the process of conducting an occupational analysis every 5 years, including review of the job-related critical tasks and the knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary to practice pharmacy. It was explained that based on the reassessment of the profession, the content outlined in the exam is updated to ensure licensure examination reflects current pharmacy practice. The committee heard from faculty at Chapman. As a part of its deliberation, the committee also discussed the need to allow a grace period after a content outline expires to give an applicant who passed the exam at the very end of the current outline time to complete the application process with the board. So we have a motion to direct staff to draft language, and they already did, to amend regulations to only accept CPJE passing score during current occupational analysis and exam content. Additionally, draft language that amends its regulations to only accept NAPLEX passing score from the current occupational analysis unless the applicant is currently licensed as a pharmacist in another state. Everybody got a copy of this, and it's 4,200 pharmacist license requirements, age, education, experience, exam, proof of qualifications. So it's item 6 that has been added, and it goes through the board may license as a pharmacist an applicant who needs all the following requirements, and it goes 1 through 5 and includes now 6 that the applicant has passed the North American Pharmacist Licensure Exam, NAPLEX, and satisfies one of the following. A, has passed NAPLEX exam on or after January 1st, 2004, and holds an active pharmacist license in another state or territory of the United States. B, has passed a version of NAPLEX that at the time of application for licensure was based on an occupational analysis that either remains current or was replaced no more than a year prior. And we talked about that time. Is that the time you want to use, Jenny, a year?
I think that's the proposal. That's something the board will get to decide as we debate if we move forward with this.
Okay, and then 7 was also included, that this applicant has passed a version of CPJE that at the time of application for licensure was based on an occupational analysis that either remains current or is replaced no more than a year prior. So that is the motion. Any remarks from the board? Or? I'm sorry, Alan. What can I help you with?
Oh, thank you. Could you explain this and just encapsulate it real quickly here, rather than that? So, the thrust of this is to what? To prevent people that are
people who fall into the period of time when we've done the job analysis. So it's a 5-year deal. So as I understand it, and Jenny, I may need your help on this, we do an analysis every 5 years. And here you graduated from pharmacy school, so we did an analysis in 17, and you graduate in 19. So you fall within that analysis time. And if we did it in 17 and it's a 5-year deal, it's good till 22. So people who have graduated between 17 and 22, that's their time frame. Now, if you graduate in 22 or 23 and you're a year out, then you can take it as well. But you can't rely on an exam that you took in 2015.
The California
because it's an old job analysis. The requirements and have changed, and so we're just saying that
this is for the
CPJE or even NAPLEX.
It's really all about competency,
Well,
and making sure that what we tested you for is applicable to what is actually happening today. And our worry is not people who are took the NAPLEX in 2005 and now are coming in California, but they've been practicing the whole time. Our worry is those people who are took the NAPLEX or the CPJE 5-10 years ago, past part of it, and now want to come and take the other part and become licensed, because we're afraid that and they're not.
And they haven't been practicing.
They haven't been practicing, so we're not sure that they're competent. And so we're just saying, if that's the situation, just retake that test before you.
Okay, so
Practice.
in essence, you just want to put a time limitation on the CPJE test. Is that what you want?
That it's related to the period within which you
Within-
qualify for licensure is related to the competency that the exam measures based on the content
Right,
outline.
right. Basically, if you take your CPJE 5 years ago and you never apply for the license, now when you want to reapply, you have to retake the CPJE. That's
So
it,
you're
right?
still keeping current with the profession.
If you haven't been
Right.
working.
If you
Yeah,
haven't,
If
you're
you haven't
not
been
a
working.
registered pharmacist at another state, then you have to retake the CPJE.
And I
Is that
want to
it?
clarify, it's not just the CPJE, it's also the NAPLEX.
Then you'll be
But once
putting the
again,
time
you haven't been
limitation on the
working.
NAPLEX exam too.
Right, the same deal works with the NAPLEX. And the
Ex-
underlying thing is you
except-
haven't been working as a pharmacist.
Except on the NAPLEX, if you have a license in another state, you're exempt.
Well, you're good for
Then you're
NAPLEX,
okay.
but you're still going to have to take CPJE.
CPJE,
Yeah,
but for
yeah.
NAPLEX, you're good
Yeah.
if you have a license. in another
It's just a matter. It's just a way that we feel is going to keep our incoming pharmacists, our newly licensed pharmacists, that we can reassure ourselves that they're current. And as I said, Alan, it relates to the pharmacist who took it some years ago and hasn't worked, hasn't been licensed anywhere.
or taking CE arguably.
Okay, public. Everybody good?
Mr.
All right.
Weiser?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Weiser, while he's coming up, may I just, after the committee discussion that at the time of the committee, they believed that this could be done through regulation. I just want to highlight that the language that you are considering is actually a statutory change, which will require legislation as opposed to regulation.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, William Stewart, professional member. You know, what, I think the operative word, and I want to make sure it's clear, is that if they're not working. Because
Right, that's very clear.
I'm currently licensed in, I think, 12 states. And I've had to take the CPT or JE exams each time to understand the laws of the particular state. I'm also a practicing pharmacist. So I kind of support this. I want to maybe, if it clears up a little bit of your mind, is that I'm old, but I'm still practicing. And my objective
I
regarding.
don't understand that. Tom.
Yeah. As you can tell by the hairline. And the operative word is if you're still practicing and you're
Well,
still
here's-
engaged.
Here's how it reads. 6II says holds an active pharmacist license in another state or territory of the United States. So, you know, you've done that 12 times.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Stay in California.
Anybody else? Okay. Madam Chair, we have a motion. Madam President, a motion.
All right.
Second.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second. I'll
Ricardo's
second.
good. Debbie's good.
All in favor?
All right. I'm back.
You're on
hitting
a roll.
home runs here. Yay. So. We're at agenda item number F, which is discussion and consideration of renewal requirements for individual licenses and facility licenses. And we have a recommended amendment to regs. So, currently the board's regs outline specific renewal requirements for pharmacists, pharmacy techs, designated reps, pharmacies, non-resident wholesalers, non-resident pharmacies. Specifically, these licensees are required to indicate that they have been disciplined, required to indicate if they have been disciplined by any governmental agency since their last renewal. For example, a pharmacist must answer, since you last renewed your license, have you had any license disciplined by a government agency or another disciplinary body, or have you been convicted of any crime in any state, the U.S. or its territories, military court, or foreign country? So as the board's regulatory jurisdiction continues to grow, and to say it's growing is an understatement, the renewal requirement for the new license types listed that I'm going to mention were not drafted to include the same discipline disclosure. That includes designated reps for 3PL, designated reps for veterinary, designated reps for reverse distributor, designated paramedics, non-residential third-party logistics provider, and non-resident outsourcing. So, staff is recommending simplifying its regulations. Am I good? To consolidate the renewal requirements for license issued to a premise, as well as license issued to an individual. The approach would allow for the incorporation of new licenses that will be implemented in the future and follows the same format as the approach that the board approved for the abandonment of applications that we did at our February meeting. The committee agreed with staff's recommendation to consolidate the renewal requirements for licenses into two categories: licenses issued to individuals and licenses issued to a premise. As part of its deliberation, the committee noted that using this approach will ensure that any future licensing types will have the same renewal requirements without having to modify any regulation. So the committee also heard testimony from the public, and there was absolute support. The committee recommendation, which is our motion, is to direct staff to draft language, consolidate the renewal requirement for licenses, and I have it with me, as luck would have it. Got it. So, hang on a second. G, I'm on G, right?
It's this one, isn't it?
F. This one. Got it. So, if you look at 1702 in your packet, you'll see under B, which is 4B, as a condition of renewal, a pharmacist applicant shall disclose on the renewal form whether he or she has been convicted, as defined by 409 of the Business and Professional Code, of any violation of law in this or any other state, the United States, country since his last renewal. So, as we go further down, this is the license renewal requirement. The condition of renewal, a pharmacist applicant shall disclose whether he or she has complied with any continuing education requirements to renew his or her license or advanced pharmacy. This isn't the right one, is it? Hang on. Okay, got it. Good, thank you. Pharmacy technician. So amendment of 1702.1, which is pharmacy, it was pharmacy technician renewal requirements. Now it's for individual licenses other than a pharmacist. And this section applies to the renewal of any license held by an individual other than a license as a pharmacist or an advanced practice pharmacist. And as this goes down, it changes all the wording from like a pharmacy technician in 1702.1 to the individual, and A1, A2, individual instead of pharmacy technician. So as we were saying, it changes the language to the individual rather than the specific category. So that is the pharmacy technician. However, now it includes others. And what we would be doing would be repealing 1702.2 because it's no longer necessary, and that's the designated rep renewal requirements. And 1702.5, which is the renewal requirements for a premise or a facility. This section applies to renewal applications submitted by a licensed premise or a facility. And it goes on to say in A that a condition of renewal, an applicant seeking renewal of a premise or facility, and it just uses that broad term rather than being specific about non-residential wholesaler or non-residential pharmacy. So it's just a matter of cleaning everything up and making it consistent. And those are the three, I guess four maybe, huh? that we have to deal with. One is 1702.5. The other is 1702, which is the, and 1702.1. Is that right? And we have to repeal 1702.2. So I confused myself and everybody else on this?
We had a lot of ledge proposals coming out of, or regulation proposals coming out of licensing.
Okay, so board, if there are any questions, remarks, public? Dennis, you're leaving? Okay, Dennis. Don't think it wasn't noticed. All right. Call for a vote, Madam President?
Yes, it's called. Oh,
Okay,
do you want to make a motion, Stan?
so moved.
Second, Victor? Public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Okay,
we're almost done. So after we're done with licensing, we'll take a lunch break.
okay, cool. So I think I'm on F now, consideration. G, I'm actually on G, yes. Discussion and consideration of CE for advanced practice pharmacists. So the relevant law is 4210, 4233, 4231. And 4231 establishes that a pharmacist renewal requires that include 30 units of CE, as well as language to place a pharmacist's license in inactive status for failing to comply with renewal requirements. So as of December 13th, the board began accepting applications for advanced practice pharmacists, yay, and shortly thereafter in 2017, we began issuing licenses for advanced practice pharmacists. 279, by the way.
279 at the beginning of April.
An advanced pharmacist practice is required to complete an additional 10 hours of CE with each renewal cycle in addition to the 30. So, pursuant to 4231, if a pharmacist submits a renewal application and a renewal fee but does not certify on the renewal application that he or she has completed 30 hours of continuing ed, the board has the authority to place their license in inactive status. So as a result, the board is unable to place an advanced, however, the board is, BPC 4233 was not written in that same manner. And so as a result, our board is unable to place an advanced practice pharmacist who does not certify that he or she has completed that additional 10 hours. We cannot currently place that person's license on inactive status for not completing those other 10 hours. So staff recommends amending the board's regulation to specify that at the time of renewal, the advanced practice pharmacist must provide to the board the renewal application, renewal fee, certify that he or she has completed 10 hours of CE. And additionally, the staff recommends that if an advanced practice pharmacist is unable to provide proof of completing 10 hours of continuing ed, when audited, his or her license should be placed on inactive status. So during our meeting, members discussed the CE requirements of an advanced practice pharmacist. The committee agreed with staff. The committee also determined that an advanced practice pharmacist is unable to provide the proof of the 10 hours that his or her license should go on inactive status. So the motion is to direct staff to draft language, which they did. And here is the language. And it's 1732.5. And it's the addition of C, that each applicant for renewal for an APP license shall submit proof to the board that the applicant has renewed the pharmacist license pursuant to 4231 of the BMP code and completed 10 hours of additional CE in the prior 24 months. If an applicant submits the renewal application of an APP and payment of the renewal fee, but does not submit proof to the board that the license has completed the additional 10 hours of CE, or if as part of the investigation of an audit conducted by the board, an APP fails to provide documentation substantiating the completion of continuing education as required, the board shall cancel the active APP license and issue an inactive APP license in its place. The licensee with an inactive advanced practice license issued pursuant to this section may obtain an active APP license by paying the renewal fee due and submitting proof to the board that the licensee has completed the additional 10 hours of CE. And then it continues on to say all pharmacists and all advanced practice pharmacists, a change in the language to include the APP. And that's it. That's the motion.
Well,
Go right ahead.
I'll let Victor go.
I just want to ask you, do you have to specify whether those CE are board approved for ACPE or whatnot?
No.
ACPE approved.
We require that in a different section of the law, so it would be board approved, and they additionally have to have CE in the area in which they're working as an advanced practice pharmacist.
The whole
So
thing
the
was,
statute already establishes
the
that.
whole thing was them, doing the 10 hours and us having a hammer to hold over them if they didn't.
My question was going to be this last sentence, that if it's inactive, that they can obtain an active license by paying the renewal fee and submitting proof. Do we need to put a time limit on that?
I was wondering about that, but we don't
Well,
have
that's
it
what you and I
elsewhere.
are like so in sync.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah,
My
it is.
wife would worry about it.
But anyway, Jenny, do we need to put a time limit in the regs?
I think the board might want to consider that, or else we'll be coming back with a subsequent modification. I don't know, like within 5 years, within 4 years?
Well, but the license is only good for 2 years.
Yeah,
Right,
so I
that's
think
what I'm talking
within,
about, but
I
do you
think
have to-
within like 6 months.
Yeah. Look at
Come
this.
on.
Otherwise,
My
they
mouth
can
to
just
your lips.
reapply afterwards. They can just reapply if they pass the 6 months.
Right, if it's more than 6 months, they just have to start the process over.
Okay, so that's a good add. So we will add that to the language, and we will vote on it with the addition and let the attorneys craft it.
So because we made modifications to the committee recommendation, we probably need a motion, right?
So Stan, could I make a new motion?
I would love it.
And before you make your motion, can I
Yes, ma'am.
offer one other bit of clarification?
Absolutely.
The language that you were looking at, and then the language that started to confuse you on the last agenda item, and I apologize that those got merged. Generally speaking, the proof that would be submitted to the Board of Compliance is usually the question on the renewal application. Have you completed this number of hours, the CE number of hours?
Right.
And that's, I think, what's anticipated for this as well. And that was the section that was in the prior, accidentally in the prior agenda item that would basically require that, answering that question. So we would smooth it out and
Okay, good.
make it pretty,
And you
but
would
that's
add-
the
and you
type
would
of
add the
proof.
time limit for getting their additional 10 CE units. Is
I'm
that right?
sorry.
So we're talking about at the very end of C, D. So a licensee with an inactive pharmacist license issued pursuant to this section may obtain an active advanced pharmacist license by paying the renewal fee and submitting proof to the board that the licensee has completed the additional 10 hours of continuing pharmacy education within 180 days.
Of the due date or something.
Good.
And so our motion would be to approve this proposed amendment
Right.
to 1732.5C.
And D.
CD.
C and
This is-
E.
this
and
is regulatory?
initiate-
And E.
This is, no, this is, yeah, this is regulation.
So you're going to initiate rulemaking?
And initiate
Yet another one.
rulemaking
Right.
process, further delegating to the executive officer the authority to make any non-substantive changes and clarify changing consistent with the board's policy direction upon recommendation of the control agencies.
And then the second was Victor or Stan?
Victor's good.
Well, somebody needs to do it. I don't.
Victor, there you go.
Okay, I point of clarification, partway through this, we quit putting in advanced practice, and we just started referring to the entity as an advanced pharmacist. I think we intend to keep advanced practice pharmacist.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's scattered throughout
Thank
the
you.
whole section.
Oh, there it is, yeah, advanced pharmacist.
Well,
Okay. So, yeah,
Well,
we
that's
wanna
part of
clean
that
up.
delegation we're giving
and,
you.
and I'm already
Yeah,
jumping
right.
in to do it.
I apologize, but could I get a little bit of clarification? The 180-day time frame means that you wanted them to have completed the CE within the 180 days prior to requesting reactivation of their license?
No, the 180 days means that, so they haven't provided, oh, so you're assuming that they haven't even done the CE?
Correct.
Yeah, that's my assumption also.
Okay.
So I'm glad we're having this clear. So am I correct that the intent is to ensure that when they move to reactivate their license, they have a recent CE as a condition of reactivation?
Right.
Am I?
Right.
Thank you.
And that they have to do that process within 180 days. So the CE and the
Keeping
application
everything
has to
current.
be received within 180 days.
Well, but the only piece missing is the CE.
Well,
So
I'm
is the
thinking
in-
that they might just not have done the paperwork. I mean, because when they do the application, they're supposed to send in their CE.
No, they just signed for it, don't they?
They signed for it. If we audit them, they may be unable to provide it,
Right.
or they may just not, they may renew without filling in a number.
So,
Or it could be that they only have half of them.
so
But
what?
it says if an applicant submits the renewal application of advanced practice pharmacist and payment of the renew fee, but does not submit proof to the board that the licensee has completed the additional 10 hours of continuing education. So I thought the purpose was with the advanced practice pharmacist, because even up above, it says that you renew the license and number 2, completed 10 additional hours. I thought that you had to provide the 10 hours with the application.
We don't require it on the 30.
I know we don't, but I'm thinking with I thought that's the whole point, advanced practice, so you're asking them to include the 10 hours.
No, my understanding was that we expected the pharmacist, the language is very similar to a regular a renewal for a pharmacist. However, we did not include with the advanced practice pharmacist the provision that if they don't say, yes, we did the 10 hours, or if they can't substantiate it if being audited, then they go on inactive. So
But
we weren't able
do you
to put them on
understand, Jenny, what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
I do say,
The
whether
words
we're
here,
asking
I
for
understand what you're
submitted.
saying, but the words here are not in sync with what Stan's saying.
Right, but does not submit proof to the board that the licensee has completed the additional 10 hours of CE education at the time of renewal. So if they don't turn it in, basically, you're saying that they should be turning it in based the way that this is phrased.
The way this is read.
Got it, right. So if, when requested, would solve that problem,
Okay, good. That is good.
or when audited, or when requested.
Okay.
When requested.
So I think
So then
that's
so I was thinking that was what was missing, that it was done, but that documentation was missing. So then,
We generally don't ask to have the CE come in as
Yeah,
part of the
I
renewal
would-
because it's a lot of paper.
I was thinking you guys were doing it just because it's advanced practice,
Is-
and I thought
Well,
you
we're
wanted
going
extra.
to, it's no secret that we're going to take a look at what's coming in initially.
Can I just ask just a off the wall question? All the work we're going through for 10 hours of CE, is it really worth doing this for an additional 10 hours? This is an advanced practice
What
pharmacist,
work are we
right?
talking about?
Well, the fact that you're going to have to go track them.
We're
you're
not
No,
gonna
no,
have
track
to
no,
go
we're
check them.
undoing that.
Yeah,
This
no.
language here, she's
No,
undoing
we're not going to
it.
track. They're just going to
Oh.
sign their
She's gonna-
license saying
Same as
that they
everything
did
else.
30
She's going to
units.
say, where it says
Okay.
that you have to provide the
Yeah.
CE with your application,
Yeah.
she's going to change that to say, if requested.
Yeah.
So that
Okay.
you don't have to attach it.
Well, yeah, that wasn't the intent of the committee.
But that's what the words say.
Well,
Yeah.
somewhat.
I got it.
So what?
All right.
You're sounding like a curmudgeon
I'm
now.
trying to understand. So when you renew, you're just saying,
Ralph,
in
as soon as
addition to
Danny's
the
done.
30 hours, you're gonna have, so I'm not gonna renew unless I have my 30 hours.
Well, you'll have
So-
40 now. You'll have
Right,
40
so in
hours,
other
right?
words, I wouldn't renew unless I have the 40 if I'm,
Well,
Well,
but
we
one,
will
one,
tell you that there are some that will.
I was gonna
attempt
say,
to
one can
renew
only
and they
wonder.
don't have.
Right. But as a
okay, but that can happen with us too. I mean, with the 30, unless
Absolutely.
it's audited. So I don't understand. I don't
So,
understand.
Jenny, let
what's
me
the
ask you,
controversy
if
here.
I'm not, let's just your regular old me, regular pharmacist, and you audit me and I don't have my 30 hours, do I get 6 months to make it up?
No. We will require you to come into compliance immediately. If you don't, we will turn your license into inactive because you can't provide fulfillment of your renewal requirements. And the law gives us the ability to do that. And then when you want to become active again, once we make your license inactive, you cannot work. In order to become an active working pharmacist again in California, you'd have to provide us the additional CE to fulfill your requirement. We will tell you, one, that you can't use that additional CE that you just completed
For the
in
next
order to
cycle.
fulfill for the next one. And two, you need to pay us a licensing fee to reactivate your license.
I mean, so I think that this process should be the same.
It's the same. That's what the
But
intent
at
is.
some point, it seems like even with the regular pharmacists, we should say, after this point, you can't just reactivate.
We have never said that. We just leave it sitting
Yeah, I
out
agree
there.
with Debbie
Yeah.
because we should have the same standard for both
Yeah.
licenses.
Well, but we do, there's two different issues here. Debbie's saying that we should have a bigger
Well-
hammer in the event that they don't do the CE. Is that correct?
There is
No,
there is a
I'm just saying we should have a number of days by which they have to do it, or they, even if you're just a regular pharmacist, you have to start all
Regardless
over.
of the license.
There is actually, for a pharmacist, if you don't renew your license 5 years after it was last renewed, so essentially 3 years after it expires, your license is canceled by operational law. It's just flat out gone. And then in order to be a pharmacist again, you have to reapply and pass all of the requirements to become licensed again.
Right.
You're better off doing the CE.
But
Yeah.
So we do have a requirement in law.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, no, I just want to make sure, are we being consistent here?
You're making it 6 months for a advanced practice pharmacist
For that 10
to finish
hours.
it. Yes, to
For
finish
just their
that.
10 hours.
Right.
The other 30 they have to have done, but this is just the 10 hours. Is that fair, Amy?
I think there's an issue, and I think that if
I
a
think it should.
pharmacist,
I agree with Debbie. I think it should be the same. Whatever we have for pharmacists, we should have also for this.
Well, we don't
And,
have
and
any.
there is still a hole there, because if you only complete 28 hours as a pharmacist and we find out that you haven't earned it and you never complete it, your license is inactive. If you renew it inactive again or attempt to renew it as active, we're not going to do it until you provide us an additional 30 hours of CE. I think there's a gaping hole there. I think we need to work on the language a little
Shall
more.
we table
folks.
this and bring it back to
Yeah,
our-
I would
Let's
prefer to
take care of
clean
that
this
licensing.
ambiguity up.
And let's
Maybe look at maybe Stan, look at both so that maybe
Yes,
there
yeah,
you can
yeah, that's
update
what-
the regular license as well, renewal, so that they
Okay.
match.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Laura, have you get a gist of what we're curious
Yes.
about?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So at our
and
next
we're-
licensing committee, which is in June, perhaps we could take another look at this.
Yeah,
We will.
it should be a just quick clarification, but I think you're right to make it consistent. We need to make sure we've covered all situations.
Okay,
I agree with that.
so, Ralph, we have nothing to talk about. If you want to come to our June meeting, that'd be great, though. Ray. Okay, Ray.
Have you
he's
used
the
that
ray of
before?
light.
You can call me Ray. Got it. Okay, good. Thank you, Ray. So moving along, we're on item number H, which is our licensing statistics. And I won't read them all, but it's impressive how many licenses we have. And as I said, what really impressed me was the 279. I mean, they're all impressive, but we have now 279 advanced practice pharmacists. So good for each and every one of them, and all those. And all those who are planning on doing it as well. So it's here, our future meetings in June. If everybody has enjoyed this and they'd like we have another show, June 26th, location to be determined. And then if you really enjoy it, September 26th, location to be determined. Madam President, that completes the licensing committee report.
Thank
for your
you. Thank you,
patience.
Stan.
I just want to tell you guys how lucky you are. You get 30 hours of CPE every 2 years. CPA license requires 80.
Well, there's got to be a reason for that, Greg.
Yeah. You guys don't have enough.
Thank you,
Yours
Stan.
is probably
Great,
easier.
great report, and
Well, we
thanks for
handle
all.
money.
Thanks for all the work on the licensing
My
committee.
pleasure.
We will break for lunch. Shall we break until 2, you think? And start back up at 2 p.m.? Give people a
1:08.
chance to get some lunch. And we'll go on to the enforcement committee at 2. Thank you.